Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. Welcome back to my co-host, Jordan Tyra. How are we doing, Jordan?
Good, thanks. We've got a squad session going on downstairs, hence the headphones. So any rowdy children noises that you hear, that's what's happening. But now, all good, all good. We've had a bit of snow today as well, so it's all going on down south of England.
It's good to see a busy facility down on the south coast. It is cold, though. I have got two hot water bottles right here because it's vegan. So just a little insight into my world. We are joined by Mike Brown. Mike, how are we doing?
Yeah, very good, boys. Yeah, not quite snowing over here, but yeah, pretty good.
We'll give an insight into where you are in a second because we've not mentioned that yet. I'm sure I've mentioned it in the intro, but we'll get into that in a second. But Mike, we start in the same place on every episode, and that's just giving us a little rundown on you, your background, where you've been, the jobs you've had. So do you want to give us a little guided tour?
Yeah, no problem. First of all, thanks for having me, boys. It's good to come on and chat. It's always a pleasure. So, yeah, first of all, I started out studying sports rehabilitation at the University of Hull. My goal was always to be quote unquote physio, but I never really wanted to work in hospitals and stuff. So I thought sports rehab that's the way to go. So I studied at Hull for 3 years, came out and then realized I needed the physio title to actually work in sport. So I went back and did a master's in, first of all, time it just didn't work. So I did another master's in sports therapy, advanced sport therapy and rehab sciences before then doing a second master's in physio. So a little longer than I wanted to do at school and studying, but set me up nicely. So luckily I got a job straight out of university at Cast Tigers. So I managed to go into rugby league for 3 seasons I did then, and that was an unbelievable experience for me. The accent's not too strong, but I am from Liverpool, so there's only one sport there, so it was just football. So actually going into a new sport, and I had to go to the basics. I didn't even know how to pass or catch a rugby ball. It was all alien to me. So that was a great eye opener, and the club at the time were going through some fantastic period. There was some great coaches, some great staff, particularly Matty Crowther, who was the head physio at the time. He really helped shape how I wanted to be, not only as a clinician but as a leader. So that was fantastic. The players you're basically putting them together every week, quite literally with tape to get these rugby league boys on the field. So we went through a whole load of injuries. But like I mentioned, football's sort of my passion. That's where I had the opportunity to go to Hull City. So I worked at Hull City as the head of academy physiotherapy. I did another 3 years there. So again, some great times. A little bit more on the managerial side. Anyone who's worked in sort of academies knows that it's actually probably tougher than the first team because you've got a lot of moving pieces with a lot of the play. So making sure they have all medical cover that's required with the EPPP and things like that is there's a lot of moving parts. So that was a good experience for me. Then yeah, I had a short spell at Notts County where I came across Jordan, quite fortunately enough. So, um, that was a very short stint there. We may get onto it, but a bit of a turbulent time in the club's sort of history. But it was such an eye opener to me for the first sort of role in a first team setting, just the demands that it placed on me as the sort of leader of the medical team. We didn't have the best of seasons, so it was pretty tough. And quite often it's the medical or physical team's fault for us losing games. So there was a lot of pressure there. So it was a really good eye opener. But circumstances meant it wasn't a very long stay. But luckily and pretty fortunately, I got a random message on LinkedIn asking if I'd be interested in talking about a position in Norway, in a team called Bodø/Glimt, which I quickly went on Google. I had no idea where that was and realized it was pretty high up in the Arctic Circle. So I said to my wife, if you fancied a bit of cold weather, so I took the call. And then literally 2 days later, I was on a plane to Norway to meet the doctor and the sporting director, and then 2 weeks later I would move there. So I spent 4 fantastic seasons at Bodø/Glimt. We had some great nights. We were in European competitions. We won the league twice. Came second twice. It was fantastic opportunity. For me, as that role, that's when I took the step across to sort of manage both medical and physical and head up the whole performance team. So that was another step for me. It's something I was always kind of interested in as well, and seeing that alignment between the whole support team. But let's be honest, the two big factors in it is the medical physical. So trying to align those two as well as the more holistic approach and the people like the nutrition and stuff like this. So the opportunity to align everyone was great. And like I say, we had a lot of success. It seems to be a 3 or 4 years. That seems to be when people get fed up with me or I decide to leave. But after 4 years again, I made the move over here in 2022 to my current role as head of physical performance at the MLS team San Jose Earthquakes. It was a tough decision. It was a great time at Buda Glimt, and they're still enjoying great times as well. So hopefully I left a bit of a legacy there. But it was just the right time. Me and my family, we thought a Californian sunshine might be quite nice after the Arctic Circle. It's a great opportunity to be in the league. So the time was right. So we made the move out here. So now, yeah, I've just finished my second year out here in the States.
Brilliant, mate. No, it's a top breakdown. We'll get back into the time at Notts County in a second, because I'm sure there's plenty between the two of you. There's going to be plenty of lessons and stories on that in a sec. Well, just to start with, mate, just talk us through your transition in terms of your roles. So you said about physiotherapy initially, and then now I know going into more of like a head of physical performance role. Has that been like quite a natural progression for you, or was it something that you had in mind that you wanted to transition into, which is why you kind of took the jobs that you did?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, really. I always found myself when I was mixing in physio circles that I always felt a little bit of a black sheep, because I was talking more about performance than the more on the sort of natural medical side of things. And it was always more of a, yeah, but we'll do this. If we do this, will it help win games? So I played at a very low level myself on the books in Conference and Conference North. So I've always had that interest in football. So I felt it was natural for me to address things from a more performance and a more specifically football side of things. But then the same with everything. There's a little bit of luck. You have to be in the right place at the right time. Buda Glimt were going through a big transition in terms of what they wanted to achieve. There was a clear vision, at least from the technical side of things, of how they wanted to play. And then it was just putting the sort of things in place to get there. So after meeting with the sporting director and the doctor, sorry, which was for the physio role, it became apparent that, okay, maybe there's an opportunity to try and align both of what we're doing. And like I say, it was lucky the club were in a growth sort of moment that they wanted to invest in this and wanted to achieve it. So for me, I was there and then jumped at that opportunity. And it was a good chance for me to shape my sort of philosophy in my career. A big thing that helped me actually was after my first season was it was 2020, so it was COVID. So I had a little longer than usual in pre-season to actually work with the boys and figure out how I wanted to do stuff going into my first full season. So just some background, in 2019, I arrived in first game of the season. So I didn't have a pre-season with them. So my first pre-season was COVID. So that was a good opportunity. It was small groups as it was in the whole world, but it was a really good chance to actually shape how I wanted to do things from a performance side of things.
And you said before about the sort of random message on LinkedIn, but we obviously speak a lot about opportunities within the game. Networking is obviously something we discuss a lot. But have you got any more context to that in terms of, was it literally out of the blue, or was it through contacts, through friends of friends or colleagues of colleagues? Like, how did that come about?
It was out of the blue. So I like yourself, I put quite a lot of focus on the networking and actually communicating, not only for opportunities, but it gives me a good chance for some free knowledge. You guys might tell me something that I need or don't know, and then it's a small snippet that can help me and help improve the club. So all I'm investing in that is time. So I'm always sort of looking for them opportunities to talk and to sort of grow myself and others. So that's one thing. So I think I'd posted something about youth development and how that ties into the first team. And then just, yeah, happily seen by the doctor, who then just reached out. So it was a sort of random moment. My role here at the Quakes was also an assist from LinkedIn. That was I messaged just for a connection with Steve Tashian, and just wanted to have a little chat with him, and he messaged straight back about, would you be interested in talking about this opportunity? So from a pretty random message to me and then a random message from me, I've managed to pick up my two last opportunities. So I'm a big believer in networking and how LinkedIn sort of helps.
I had a feeling there's going to be a bit more context to it, because I know you're sort of brushing past that and saying that it is random, but that says to me, and Jordan, you can obviously input on this as well, that's the work. And it might not seem a lot of work, but it's a lot of work that people wouldn't do in terms of putting a bit of time into LinkedIn or whatever it is, that's probably just nudged you above looking at profiles on LinkedIn and going, actually, I saw Mike put out something the other day. Go back and have a look. That aligns with our sort of vision, what we want. And then the opportunity comes, doesn't it? So it isn't completely like stick my finger up and see who we find sort of thing. I think there's work that's gone into that, isn't there? Which is a lesson that I think a lot of people can take.
Yeah, it's never. Yeah, you said it there, Mike. You've been putting stuff, you've been active, you've been actually putting time into it. I think if you were sat there having never posted anything and you just had a profile and then all of a sudden somebody reaches out, it's like, wow, that's a real sort of one in a million. But we've said it before many, many times in terms of social media can actually be like an extension of your CV sort of thing, and actually an active CV that is getting pushed out to people rather than just a PDF that you've got ready to send out when you want. So it ties into a lot of what we said on the previous podcasts and episodes in terms of just, again, it's not taking hours and hours and hours of creating content. It's just posting something you've done today, something you've reflected on and learned about. I was just looking through yours before, Mike, on the challenges you face in terms of travel and preparing the team for travel in the MLS, and those sorts of things actually just show. And that's what we're going to come on to. Seamless transition there, but in terms of what you actually got to face and think about, and then reflect as a practitioner, and people go, oh, like you say, it's not just sort of finger in the air and see what happens. It's actually, I'm actively preparing our teams and preparing our players for what comes next, and I think that's really important. So, yeah, go on, expand on that, your latest post, because I think that was a really good one in terms of what some of the challenges that you're facing in the MLS versus European football and versus obviously English football. What sort of things are you coming up against?
Yeah, so I've posted a little bit about this recently because it is an interesting topic, and for me, I knew America was a big country, but not this big. So like, it's insane the amount of traveling that you have to do, and what sort of circumstances that you're getting when you arrive there. So you could be coming from 30 degrees in California, flying to somewhere, I don't know, like we went to St. Louis in 2023 and it was below zero. So it went from like a 35-degree shift in a day. So just trying to prepare what you're doing as a team and prepare for sort of what you're going to face. And then also the big one for me is how you're going to get there. COVID, actually, I heard before COVID that the league you could only have so many charter planes per year. Now they've changed that, so we're allowed to charter for every game, which is a huge advantage to us. I speak to our staff here in the second team in the academy, and they're on commercial planes, and sometimes it's 2 or 3 sort of changes and flights, it's not easy, but luckily in the first team we were able to be a little bit more specific in how we want to do stuff when we want to travel. But I remember posting, I think last year, and one of our journeys was the equivalent of London to the furthest point in Russia that you can imagine, something like this. I can't quite remember, but it's for us to do that and then come back, and then you're doing it again at the weekend, or you're playing 2 days later. It's really eye-opening as to what you can face. And a big one for me was not only the players. We know players are going to go through the mill, they're going to have a tough time. They don't sleep very much after a game. We know that they're under the most pressure, but also from a staff and a performance team, is we're leaving straight after games, getting home at 4 a.m. I don't know if you boys have children, but my daughter doesn't really care if I get in at 4 o'clock and have an hour's sleep. She's jumping on me at 5:30. She doesn't care. So the guys with families, it's a tough one, and it's a big strain. If you're winning games, things are a little easier, but if you're losing games as well, and then having that motivation to come in. So I think it's really important to have a couple of ways that you can like personally deal with that, but also from a staffing point of view, we always try and ensure we have somebody fresh. For example, something simple like taking the warm up or taking the activation the day after a long travel or something like this. So we keep somebody at home who can bring a little bit of energy, bring a bit of positivity to the group when we need it. I think that's really important that we almost periodize and almost sort of use our staff as well as we can to get the best out of them. It's a performance game for everybody. If we just keep burning a candle at both ends, the staff aren't going to be able to give what they need to give as well as the players. So where we have rotation on the field, I think it's important to have that rotation off. We try and be a little flexible in who travels where. I usually try and take the brunt of that because in my role, I'm slightly less player facing than some of the other guys. So if I need to come in a little room like this and hide for an hour or so and do some computer work, I can. Whereas the other guys need to be in the gym and a little bit more hands-on with the boys. So we try and rotate that and just keep that freshness throughout. So that's just a different type of angle that I try and look at it from. And then you have the usual that people look at from the team perspective on we got given a really nice sorry, this is just a little anecdote, really nice first class plane for our travels, and it was great. The seats were nice and big, and on our journey out there it was perfect, but the journey back you can't recline the seats, so it was like 3 a.m. and we were sat upright on these chairs, and then we just kind of requested, no, we want the normal plane so people can lie down flat on a free seater. So it's small little details of just figuring out what works best for the players, what works best for sort of travel time and how you're going to approach it, and then just have a plan for it. And then if you have to be flexible, that's probably what most plans happen in sport. Everything changes. So yeah, just have a plan and be flexible is probably the biggest take home.
You've covered a couple of things that I was actually going to ask, because I remember, I can't remember what episode it was, but Tom Williams was on a long time ago now. And I think at the time, I might be wrong, he was either at DC or Galaxy possibly. And he spoke about the challenges. And one of them was that they weren't so many charter flights per season. So I'm glad you sort of updated us on that, because that was one thing I was going to ask. And the other thing was about not just the players, but it's also the load on the staff. And I love the fact that you spoke about that rotation and utilizing different staff at different time, because the players will get a lot of focus on that, won't they? That they're doing this much travel, that much travel. And obviously that's a big part of your job in terms of recovering and making sure that they're ready to go again. But I love that insight in terms of how you are keeping the energy. Because it could be the worst possible thing, couldn't it? You all get back, you're all tired, you're then going into a session, the coach isn't tired, so that you're not quite got the energy where it needs to be. Then it affects the rest of the session, goes throughout the players, and it's that knock-on effect, isn't it? So I love that point that you've just made in terms of the staffing.
I think one of my biggest things here is just we have these nice sexy titles now, like head of physical performance and stuff, but I think our job, I like the old school term, we're a support team. So however we can support the group is the most important. So by every coach has to travel. You can't just say, okay, the goalie coach, you're not coming this week, so you can build a bit of freshness. They basically have to be there, but we can do that. So the best way of us to support the team is, and it's not easy, everyone wants to be at the games, everyone wants to travel. We go to some nice places in the States especially, so it's not quite like the days in the League Two, Jordan, where it's maybe a little less sort of appealing for people to go to. So everyone wants to go to games, everyone wants to be a part of it and feel the sort of the product at the end of the week. But it's the best way that we can support the team is by maybe someone staying back, working with injured players, working with non-rostered boys, and then being ready to go to bring that energy. So it's all about support and how we can best do that.
Oh, great insight.
I don't know what you're talking about. I really liked Port Vale away. I thought it was really good. No slight on Port Vale. It's probably not, LA and places like that.
No, we go to some good places. Yeah.
It's interesting though, because I don't know if you've seen Starting Five on Netflix, which covers basketball, and that covers the demands on the players, and obviously the flying private, and and all the rest of it and getting paid what they're getting paid. But you see the demands on the family as well. And I know you've mentioned it there, Mike, in terms of being away from family and the kids and things like that. It's a big part of it, isn't it? Like, regardless of what wages and where you're going and stuff, there's a big demand.
Yeah, it's huge. So we did 73 days or nights in a hotel last year. So if you think of that over a 5-year period, that's 1 year of your kid's life that you're missing, essentially. So it's a big demand, and it's a big sort of ask, not only for me. I'm in nice hotels on charter planes, but also the actual family and the support. Luckily, my wife she is a physio, worked in sport a long time herself, so she gets it. She still gives me a fair bit of grief for being away, but she gets it. So that's helpful for me, but it is tough. And you have to really feel it, if you know what I mean. You have to want to do it. It's a sacrifice. It's a sacrifice for the kids. But for me, having that moment where I'm on the field after a nice game and looking up and seeing my family in the stands, that's my sort of why I do it, and can kind of justify it. And it's always nice. My boy's now, he's 7, so he's getting into football really sort of for the first time. We're Everton fans, so he's in for a tough time in his life, but he's starting to feel it, and you can kind of hear him having conversations with his friends like, "Oh, my daddy works at the Earthquakes," and it's there's positives as well. Like, you have to take the rough with the smooth. So it is tough, but it's the reason why we do it.
Just on the scheduling side of things, right? Obviously, you mentioned there about the travel. Fixtures is something we speak about a lot, just how things are changing, more games coming in. From your time, I suppose your time at all the clubs you've been at, but especially the time in Norway compared to now, how's that been in terms of the challenges, fixtures wise? Because obviously you said about the travel, but are games as frequent as well?
Yeah, so here in the MLS, they have the quite a powerful player association, which kind of limit how many multiple game weeks you can have, how many days off you need to have. So they actually program you need 4 days off in a row. I think it's 3 now in a row in the off season. So you have to make sure that, in the preseason, that you're actually factoring that in. And there's a player representative who works alongside us at the club to make sure that these sort of things are met. Same, you have to give them a certain period of time together in season that they get a week off. So here there is a little bit more focus on that sort of player welfare, and getting time away from the club as well. My time in Norway was really interesting because 2019 we were not expected to do anything, but we actually qualified for Europe. So we went from a 28 game season in 19 to over 50 in 2020. So that had to change everything that we did. Of course, I mentioned previously it was COVID as well, so the congestion of games there was really tight. So I think that those teams in Europe, particularly, are doing a lot more midweek games, and I know the Championship and lower down is pretty similar. But here we maybe have 4 or 5 a year where we have the midweeks, and then the rest of the time it's just Saturday to Saturday. So that's pretty nice. You can fall into that full periodization model or your training plan, however you want to do it. So it gives you more contact time with the players, which is good.
And what was that shift like? Because that's a big change, isn't it, in the amount of games? But obviously it's been successful because you got into Europe. But then what was your plan going forward from that? What needed to change from that season before to the European season?
So that was questions that we kind of asked together after the end of the season, because a bit of insight, 2018, the club survived on the last day of the season. So no one expected us to finish second or qualify for Europe. So we kind of had to quickly throw together a plan for the following season. And my biggest thing was, I remember listening to a podcast. It was Andrew Massey during his time at Liverpool. And he said that their recruitment was about signing players who were capable of working at that high intensities for 50, 60 games a season. So that's something that I really pushed within the club, that, hey, look, when we're recruiting players, let's come up with a robust screening, whether that's just looking on transfer market and making sure, okay, this guy's spent the last 5 seasons only doing 3 or 4 games a year, kind of, he's not going to be what we want. And it wasn't easy. There's a lot of conversations that there was a really good player or several really good players, but you go, yeah, but his availability isn't high enough. So to actually make people understand the importance of availability within the signings was massive. Also with player retention, there was a few good players who maybe didn't get kept on for the reason of availability. So in the 2020 season, I think the full credit to the club, they got it right. They signed some fantastic players who were maybe not the stars in their team, but were able to do it for 50, 60 games a season. And that led us to such a great year in 2020. I think it's the most successful year ever in Norwegian football. So we had a great team. We had some great academy products coming through as well. But we had a great side, a lot of good players brought in, but they could all do it. The manager didn't really like rotating, and he still doesn't, and plays his team when it's available, and that's it. So we were able to keep them in place. You obviously, with the more games, you have to come up with a more robust sort of recovery protocol, which is we worked hard as a performance and medical team to make sure that we were kind of optimizing that because we knew, right? We knew the coach wasn't going to rotate. We knew it was going to be, if the player says he's good, he's playing, unless you can kind of come up with a really good reason as to why not. So that for me made it easy. We knew we had clarity on what we needed to do, and we could invest in recovery protocols and different things in order to get them boys ready. So it was a big step up, but it was a good challenge.
I think that's a great point you just made there, and I think there was a clip doing the rounds last week. I'm going to bring up the better side of Liverpool with Jarell Quansah. I think he was saying he was hearing Trent having a conversation with one of the Liverpool staff about like what's the most important thing that we need to be doing and looking at from a physical side of thing, and Trent was talking about player availability, just being available for every game is how you get your opportunities and get better. And like you just said there, being available to play is arguably the most important physical attribute or factor. And I think a lot of young players, they forget about that sometimes, don't they? And they're thinking, oh, I want to be the fastest. I want to be like Mbappe. And some would go the other way and they go, no, I want to be like Akin Fenway and what have you. And I'm like, nah, be like James Milner. Play from 16 to 38 and carry on and winning trophies and stuff and be able to win the lactate test every year. Like they're the role models that we sort of need. So I think that point there in terms of when your match demand and training demand goes through the roof, you need a squad of players who can handle that. If you've got people who are going to break down all the time, it's going to become quite unstuck. So fair play to you. That sounds like the club really went for that and really bought into it, and it clearly had good success from it. So that's impressive to hear.
Yeah, it's for me, it's a little step further as well, because we knew, like I say, we knew he wasn't going to rotate. So it's not just we had 11, 13 players who you kind of go, okay, they're the starting group, but then we needed 25 players with also good availability for training, because we really put a lot of value in getting them big training numbers, making sure that we were getting the load we needed as well. So there was a lot of focus on making sure that the squad players were available, and it wasn't just bringing somebody in to make up the numbers. They needed to bring that right intensity in training, and I think that's something that's also missed a little bit. You can get players who play fantastic on a Saturday, but then can't train again till a Wednesday, Thursday. There's allowances for that. If they're scoring 30 goals a season, I think the rounds were going on at, I'm not sure how much Luis Suarez is training at the moment out here, but he's scoring every week. So carry on. But it's everybody else. You have to make sure that there's that good mentality, and even from a group perspective, the boys want to see everybody working hard and pulling in that same direction on the field. And if you have certain players who don't, they pull away, but they're maybe not available all the time, or they kind of struggle here from there. That these boys are professionals. They can smell this type of stuff out, and they know, and they place more value in my opinion, at least, that on the boys who are there and are working and are there every week in the rough and the smooth. So I think it's a massive point.
I'd love to get both of your points on this, and this might be a little bit controversial because it's just around that availability. In your experiences, how much do you feel is on the physical side, i.e. they pick up injuries, whether we use the phrase injury prone or not, which I know some people don't like. How much is on that side? How much is on what you just mentioned there, Mike, in terms of they might think they're game changers like a Suarez or someone that maybe I don't have to play. I don't have to be available all the time because I know how much of impact I can have on the team. So how much is like on that side in terms of I don't need to be available all the time because I know I can be effective.
Yeah, it's tough. I think if you're looking at the people like Luis Suarez and Messi and Ronaldo, they're in their own league of their own. But then I think there's maybe 200 players in the world who are maybe in that level, and the amount of people who are actually playing now, I know like I could probably be a world beater if I went and played in the eighth division here, and probably not turn up and just play. But if you're actually looking for that high performance environment, it's about not being a gamer and actually affecting day in, day out. Um, like I say, there are circumstances where you don't need to, but I think the shift in a little bit more in terms of football focus when you're training, I think has made a big difference in that. I think there's less focus on people like ourselves in terms of standing on the line and doing running back and forth. I think there's more focus now with actual building fitness through a ball. I always joke, I call the players, I think they're all Labradors. I think if you put a ball out there, they're going to chase it. So it's a lot easier than actually just working one on one or kind of come on boys, we need to run here. So I think you have to be smart in how you actually dose and how you communicate with the boys. And if you can make it relevant to them and show how it's going to improve them as a player, any protocol, I think it's important and you can get buy-in if you can communicate well.
Jordan, Mike's mentioned there about potentially like 200 players having that sort of impact. How much do you think it's that the players maybe out of that 200 believe that they probably are in the 200, if you get what I mean? They maybe rate themselves a little more highly, and they're the ones that actually just need to be available week in, week out, like your Milner, and be churning out those performances.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of them, and you see them throughout the age groups, don't you? I could list off quite a lot of young players that I've worked with who are like, I don't need to go in the gym because I'll turn up on Saturday, and it's like, okay. I think go back to your point of where do we stand now in terms of the balance. I think Mike's, in my opinion, bang on in terms of, and we had it with Martin Bouchard and talking about sports science 3.0. I think we've moved away from the days of pre-season training. You don't need your boots, lads. Get your trainers on. We're going to be running line after line after line. I think we've moved away from those days. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Still see it in some leagues. You do. And I think we are now starting to evolve as a practitioner, as practitioners that we know. Actually, I think the Labradors is a great shout that we can get real good gains and out of our players using sensible means. I've always seen it as sort of a minimal dose effect, in my opinion. I've always liked that phrase because I could spend, four sessions a week in the gym with a lad doing Nordics, single leg RDLs, different variations, loads of sort of Copenhagen's and all the stuff that we want to put into our gym programs. And then 2 sessions on the pitch. And you're thinking, yeah, he's really, really strong, but then he hasn't got the physical load on the pitch in terms of just miles in the legs, whatever you call it. And then he breaks down on a Saturday. We're going, why is he breaking down? We've been doing all these strength gains and stuff. And then you look at that and you go, well, he spent 4 times in the gym and he spent twice on the pitch. And then you break it, you flip it, and actually the minimal dose of just kind of getting those little strength gains in throughout the week as and when, and then getting the balls out, keeping them engaged, and just keeping that consistency of that, week in, week out, minimal dose effect. I personally believe in that. And I've seen that, having transitioned from working with teams day in, day out to now working with individuals more. Literally early today, came off the pitch and luckily the snow just about melted before we got onto the pitch. But I had this lad getting him fit to go and play in Gibraltar places actually. But getting him back from injury, and we've really transitioned now to most of our sessions per week are on the pitch. And it was a pretty significant injury. So the initial stages, as always, it's all gym based to start off with. And now it's just about minimal dose, keeping everything strong and ticking over and just building miles in the legs a little bit with the ball as much as we can. And occasionally I'm going to have to throw in a few kind of sort of conditioning and volume drills, but as much as you can with the ball. So I think Martin Bouchard said it really, really well. So that sports science 3.0 and how we as practitioners are developing, I think is a really good, hopeful statement of where the kind of industry is going. So that's just my view, little breakdown there. But I think Mike's Labradors is a great way of putting it. Players want to chase a football. So the more time you give them, the more buy-in is going to be, the training intensity is going to be higher, yada yada yada. And before you're getting some good gains out of training.
It's interesting to think about the context that goes into it, isn't it? Because I think this sort of psychological side comes into it a lot, doesn't it? We'd have all worked with players that we were like, I just wish you'd have just worked that a little bit harder, put a bit more in behind the scenes because you're so talented and you don't get the chance to show it often enough. And they're probably the biggest frustrations, aren't they? So no, I think some of the points you made there are great between the two of you. Let's move back to go back in time a little bit. Let's go back to Notts County because I think to get look at both of your faces like
okay, yeah.
In this, I think from you were both talking before we started recording, and there's so many lessons and insights that people can take from this time. But Jordan, do you want to just kick us off? Give us a little insight into basically your roles and maybe some of the key challenges that you faced at that time. Then I'm sure Mike's going to have some stories to back it up.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, like Notts County is a brilliant club. They are a great club, and I've got a massive soft spot for them. And when so my role was lead academy strength and conditioning coach when I joined, and essentially it was just overseeing strength and conditioning for the entire academy. We had a 23s set up, which wasn't a proper 23 setup. We had 23s players who were just young pros who were either sort of training with the first team or training sort of separate. So I was having to do their matches as well. They were in quite a few competitions. So yeah, sorting them out. You're responsible for the 18s every day, and then obviously all the way down. So that was the structure of the club. At the time when I joined, Kev Nolan was in charge. They just missed out the season before. I think they were third favourites to go up that season. And behind the scenes, things were already starting to break down. Because I remember, I think they had a really good squad, like a very good League Two squad that missed out in playoffs, and everyone was sort of expecting to go. But I think they had to balance the books that season and let a lot of their bigger players go. So going into the season, they'd let some real assets go. Unfortunately, they lost 5 games on the bounce, and Kev Nolan got sacked, and that sort of started the snowball. So when we recorded our first ever podcast, which I think it's episode 9 or something, is it 7 or 9? I always get it wrong, but of the Football Fitness Federation podcast. Yeah, right the way back. I'd just got in and I was like, can't wait to get started, going to get my teeth stuck into it. It's going to be amazing. Like the academy was genuinely really strong and had a real crop of very, very good talent. Brilliant catchment area in Nottingham. Loads of real players that actually that season sold Keon Tete on to Spurs. He's now playing at Cardiff. Tiernan Brooks now at Gateshead. Ireland the 23s. So some real good players that came through the academy that season. But it all just kind of unravelled, and I'll let Mike pick up some of when he came in and the story we were saying off air.
Yeah, so it was a tough time, and I'm the same as Jordan. As Notts County was great. It gave me my first opportunity in first team setting, which was a real eye opener as to how things worked. So for me as a young practitioner, I was working, like I said, at Hull City, going through their academy with again some great pros who are now playing in the Premier League. For that, this is how everyone behaves. Everyone's really on it. Everyone's really focused. I mean, there was Jared Bowen there, Keane Lewis Potter, who's at Brentford now, Jacob Greaves at Ipswich. So we had a fantastic team with really good young pros. Our strength coach in the academy actually had a relationship with Kev Nolan. They knew each other from their times at West Ham. So Jamie Goldsmith's now at Palace. He got the job first, and then I think there was a conversation, and then I went along as well and kind of got introduced to Kev. And I thought as a young guy, yeah, I've made it. I'm being headhunted. I'm going to a first team situation. This is going to be easy. And then, as Jordan alluded to before, I even got there, Kev had been sacked. So I was brought in by one manager, and then, like I say, I was working my notice period, and then that manager wasn't there. So I never actually got to work a day with that team. And then from there, yeah, it was tough. So I was then coming in with a manager who didn't hire me, in Harry Kuehl, but he was fantastic with me, and his assistant Warren Feeney. They really sort of embraced what we were trying to do. And it was tough because it's 5 games into the season. There was some new players that they maybe didn't want or didn't sort of fancy as it is, and then they bring in their own players in. And then I think, John, you can correct me. I think they lasted maybe 6 weeks. So I think I worked with them 6 weeks, and then there was another change at the top. So all of a sudden we were trained in the morning, and then the manager just didn't come back. So they were just let go. We then had Neil Ardley come in, who also had his own ideas. Again, was great on a day-to-day basis. The management was great. It was interesting to sort of work with different guys, but it was tough as a support team. They brought in their own players as well, and I think we were close to 40 first team players, and we had contract issues and players who weren't going to play, and then they had like their contract would be extended if they hit 10 games, got to 9, and then the chairman was saying, okay, let's maybe think about selection on that one. So there was plenty of fun stuff happening behind the scenes for us as a performance department. There was changes as well. Jamie, who I mentioned, was let go. Like I say, he then went on to work. He's in the first team with Palace, and then Jordan stepped up, working with the first team academy, under sevens, under everything. Jordan did for a couple of weeks, probably longer, and then we brought in Eric Svensson, who's a great guy. He's actually, funny enough, a Norwegian guy. So when I was getting the Buda Glimt calls, he was a bit of a reference to talk to about, mate, where is this place? So he was able to sort of help me out a little bit on that one. And he brought his own ideas. So for me, as a sort of medical team, it was tough because we were trying to support as much as we could, but ideas and ideologies, not just from a technical department, but also from a physical department, were changing. So it just meant that we had to be on our toes. And I mentioned offline, some of the stuff that was in place at Notts County was fantastic, and I'm still using it to this day. Especially some of the medical stuff and the way they communicated and reported was top level. And I have friends still at the club now, and I know they're going in a great direction, and it's really good, and I have so much sort of love and sort of pride of my time there, because it has really shaped me as a clinician. At the time, it was tough, but that 6 months was huge in my development.
I think it's important to bring it up, though, because from what you've both mentioned, these are some of the realities of first team football, but just football clubs in general, isn't it? Like, not knowing who's going to be there in terms of a head coach, a manager, having to really adapt on the fly, like being called up for a first team the night before a game and all the rest of it. These are some of the realities, aren't they, Jordan, of what you're facing. It's not what we're thinking football's going to be like before you step into them roles.
No, 100%. And I remember when I was probably younger, before I was at Notts County, trying to plan out my career, I probably didn't think my first team game was going to be told to me that was happening the day before. So that was the situation. And, you've gone all week preparing the 18s for their fixture, probably might have been Scunthorpe away or something at the time. And all of a sudden you're doing Swindon at home for the first team in a relegation scrap. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I've no idea what the first team have done this week. I've no idea who's trained. I've not really got the best idea of who's fit. You kind of know when you were in the club anyway. Obviously you're talking to staff, and then you're thinking, crap. And I remember it as well. It was Remembrance Day on the Sunday, on the Saturday. So that obviously changes the match day routine, because you've got to go out earlier and all of this sort of stuff. So I'm trying to do all of this, and I'm just like, whoa. And I remember that Saturday morning was probably the most nervous I've ever been in my career, and genuinely to this day, actually. And I think this is quite an important point. I remember thinking, if I can get through this, then I can handle a lot. And still to this day, when I'm going into situations which I'm like, whoa, this is a bit spicy, that I need to be on my game here, sometimes I do refer back to that day of going, if you can get chucked into that situation and handle it. We lost the game annoyingly, but the warm up was all right. So yeah, I think if I can handle that, I can handle a lot of things in football. But that's the reality. The opportunities do come from, unfortunately, somebody gets let go, and you take that role. Again, ideally, it doesn't happen the day before, but sometimes those sorts of things do kind of come about, and you've just got to sort of be on your toes. If you crumble under that pressure, then it's something you've got to try and at least learn from, and get better from it. But that is the reality of working in a high performance sport. Situations like that do arise all the time. So yeah, it was a fun time though. The administration time when players weren't getting paid, staff weren't getting paid, and another big shout out to the club, because I remember the supporters association actually stepped in, for a lot of the staff, and gave us like Tesco vouchers and stuff just so we could go and get some food. So yeah, and Mike's dead right. The club are going in a good direction now, and it's really good to see, because a lot of love for Notts County, and they're definitely sort of my second team. Up the pies, as they say, or you pies, as we say. So yeah, hopefully they're doing all right this season. And to be fair, they started the season well, so long way that continue.
Mike, when you reflect on that time, would you say it's one of the times in your career where you felt you developed the most just because of the amount of challenges that went on?
Absolutely. So, like I mentioned, I went from being the assistant at Castleford Tigers. So the physio who I mentioned there, Matty Crowley, he actually played rugby league for many years. So he protected everyone in the performance and medical team. He played with the head coach. They had a relationship. It was like, if you did something wrong, Matty had your back, and then he gave you a bit of a telling off in private, but he had your back. So it was a pretty sheltered environment. And then people who've worked in the academy know it's high pressure, but not the same as, wow, we need 3 points at this weekend, or jobs are on the line. So that pressure there was huge for me. And it was something that it's with the managers we've just named there. There's some big players. I grew up watching Harry Kewell, and then all of a sudden I'm there having to tell him, okay, your star player's not available because of a hamstring injury, or for something like that. So the pressure became real overnight in terms of how we were doing it. And then once manager changes started happening, you then kind of, everyone's looking over their shoulder a little bit. So just that development of making sure that we were squeaky clean as a department, was really important, because there was questions being asked all over the places. Because as Jordan mentioned, we were one of the favourites to go up that year, and then ended up getting relegated. So there was questions asked, and how can I then, this is where I started to look at communication, and how can I communicate my story, and what we're doing as a performance and a medical team. It's not, hey, look at this, I'm doing this, look how good I am. No, but it's, hey, look, have a look at this. This is our recommendation based on X, Y, and Z. And it really taught me not to take it personal. If you go with a lot of evidence to the coaches and they go, "No, I'm not interested in that." Oh, okay. Right. So that just tells me that I have to get better evidence. So another little analogy I like is that the support team, we are policemen and detectives, and the technical team head coach is the judge. That's how I see it. We have to provide evidence, and they do the sentencing. If our evidence isn't good enough, they're not going to make the decision we want them to. So how can we communicate with them to provide the right information to get the right outcome ultimately for the players? It's not us against them. We're not trying to, oh yeah, they listen to me. It's not about that. It's about actually improving for the team and the organization.
And that there is having a real impact on a team and a staff as well, isn't it? Because regardless of what a program looks like, if we can't get that message across in the right way, it's pretty pointless. And I think that's such a good lesson to sort of leave people with, that there is gold, isn't it, Jordan?
100%, 100%. And I love that analogy as well. I think that's really, really good, in terms of providing the evidence. And it's the communication, like we always say, about how you get that across to a coach is then how they see it, perceive it, and then they implement it, hopefully. But that's a good one. I'm going to steal that one. Cheers, Mike.
Brilliant. Mike, there's been some absolutely quality takeaways there for listeners. These are the episodes that I love, where you're just talking through experiences and giving the realities of football as well, in different clubs, different countries, different situations. I know, but you give a really good insight there to the listeners on your experiences. So I really appreciate you doing that. I know you mentioned LinkedIn. If people want to reach out, is that where you'd send them? Is there anywhere else?
No, yeah, check out on LinkedIn. I'm not the most social media guy on anything else. So LinkedIn is to where I kind of put stuff on. And like I say, I'm always open. Schedule, is what it is, and time difference is what it is. But I'm always kind of happy to talk and sort of connect with people and sort of help people as much as I can. And like I say, it's a two-way street, so I'm always welcome people messaging out.
If you're messaging Mike, he's probably going to be on a plane going somewhere. That's more than more than likely where he's going to be.
These charters now as well, so that's where I do most of my connecting. So that's perfect.
Brilliant. Well, Mike, thank you very much for coming on, mate. I'm sure it was a nice little reflection piece between you and Jordan as well, because I know you're not caught up for a little bit, but I really appreciate you giving up the time and coming on.
Now you're very welcome. Thanks for having me, guys. It's been great chatting.
Jordan, what a guy. What a guy. Really nice reflection piece for you both as well on the time at Notts County. But I think we just mentioned it after we start recording then, just in terms of the insights, obviously in his role now, but also his time in Norway as well. I thought it was great, wasn't it? It'll apply to a lot of people, that.
Yeah, 100%. And the jump from 28 games, I think he said, to 50. How do you go about doing that when you've gone from just surviving on the season before to all of a sudden qualifying for Europe? And it's, as a performance department, you're going, we need to think about this. Then how the recruitment plays into that, and how you're thinking, actually, we need to prepare the players better, but also we need to bring better players in who are better prepared and all that sort of stuff. So that was really good. The travel demands in the MLS always blows my mind. I've obviously never worked in the MLS, but the more you speak to people who work over there, you just go, that is nuts. Like, you talk of best practice in this country, and we moan in academy football sometimes, and I know certain academies I've worked at, Notts County being one of them, when you was, getting the minibus with the 18s and stuff to games that are an hour down the road, you're going, this is crap. Why haven't we got the coach, sort of thing? And they're they're flying across literal time zones, and it's a little bit different. So yeah, just some of those challenges was really good to hear about, and obviously just reflecting on what was a truly bonkers time at Notts County. And I think Mike hit the nail on the head that as a practitioner, I look back and I go, you sort of don't wish that on anyone, because the stress and the strain that we all went through at the club at the time, when you don't know if you're going to be able to put food on the table because you're not getting paid. And then just the changes in your role, when you're getting told, sort of less than 24 hours that you're doing the first team tomorrow. That stuff like that, it's so stressful, and it is not what you plan for. But you look back and you go, hell, that really shaped me as a practitioner and developed me as a practitioner. And like what Mike was saying there, coming in when you've sort of been brought in by a manager who's now not there, players that might not have been brought in under that manager and a different manager that you suddenly got to try and create a relationship with, and stuff like that. And exactly, you hit the nail on the head. Harry Kewell, won the Champions League with Liverpool. I was like, oh my God, I'm working with Harry Kewell, Champions League winner, as a Liverpool fan. I mean, this is mad. And all of a sudden you're trying to say and sort of tell him about his session, going, I think we're going a bit too long here. You need to can we just cut the time down a little bit? And you're thinking, I don't know if I want to do that. So things like that are just absolutely bonkers when you reflect, but it helps you as a practitioner, and everything Mike said there is spot on. So yeah, a lot for people to take away.
Yeah, I've just said to you then that I remember the exact time we were chatting on the phone about wages and stuff not coming in, and I know it was super stressful for you, which is, like, say, you don't wish that on anyone, but every time we speak to people bring up like the most challenging time in careers, where whether it is financial or whether it's just lack of facilities, equipment, and all the rest of it. And at the time, you're pulling your hair out, but you just take so much from that time, don't you? And that's why I asked Mike about whether he thinks it's the time in his career that he developed most, and he said, yeah. So it's interesting, isn't it, on reflection? I think the other thing that I wanted to get the bottom of, because I had a sneaky suspicion this was the case, was the random messages on LinkedIn. They're not as random as what you think, because I think Mike's playing it down there that he's actually done work that's led into those opportunities. Even just those posts, I think, are so important. And again, we talked about the use of social media and LinkedIn. I think spending that bit of time, you just don't know where it's going to go. I'm not saying that if you do a post, you're definitely going to get a job in the MLS. But who knows? Like, who knows who reads it? The reach can be massive now. You can get your point across. It's not the hardest thing in the world. It just takes a bit of time for you to sit down and actually put stuff together, and a bit of effort. And essentially that's what Mike's done, which has led to 2 great opportunities. So I think that's a massive lesson in itself, that if you're not doing anything to promote yourself in that way, it's a tool that you're missing out on. And I think socials and LinkedIn can be done well. It can be done very badly as well. But if you spend that bit of time and you are looking for an opportunity as well, put it into that and think about some ways you can be creative with it. Because I think Mike's just shown that it can be massively beneficial.
Yeah, 100%. And we've all seen bad examples of social media and coaches putting stuff on there, and you're thinking, I wouldn't have put that on there myself. Don't think that puts you in the best light. But if you're doing things in the right way and you're thinking about it, as a practitioner, it's literally showing that I'm reflecting on practice. And that alone is an important skill. I'm trying to reflect on what I do and show that I'm trying to improve on it. And, if you're putting together a performance department and you have a role open and somebody happens to post about something which is very aligned with that role at that time, and they're reflecting on it, and you scroll through more and you can see that they've, really started to, progress some of their practice. Why wouldn't you? Do you know what I mean? Like it's not rocket science. So yeah, I think just taking a bit of time now and then just to be active on there and just share thoughts and nudge the industry along, essentially. That's what we're trying to do. Just, I tried a new bit of research, saw something, read something, tried out with some players, and these were my findings. Players were sore, players weren't sore, players got better, whatever it might be. I think that's an important part of our industry, and the beauty is, nowadays we've got social media and LinkedIn and things like that to share that media. So, yeah, why not?
Brilliant. Jordan, another good one. I know you've had some great feedback recently on the podcast, haven't you, from a few people you've had conversations with, which is really nice to hear. I have as well, and people have been sharing it on the social. So massive thank you to everyone that's sort of reached out and let us know what their thoughts are on the podcast. Keep doing it. Keep sharing it. There's some of the LinkedIn posts have been absolutely incredible to read people's takeaways from each individual episode. I'm sure this will be another one. So if you've listened or you've watched it and you've enjoyed it, give it a share, and that alone could maybe be a post that we can put your point across as well. And if you haven't, please leave us a review as well. Spotify's dead easy. You click the 5 stars. It's dead simple. iTunes, just leave us a short comment. We've not had one for a little while, so it'd be nice to see them on there. And then also on the YouTube, if you're watching on the YouTube, a few people have left comments on the episodes recently. So if you're on YouTube and you're watching, leave us a little comment on what you took away, and we'll get back to you on that as well. So a big thank you to everyone that's done that. And then just finally, check out the sponsors, Rezzil, Hydro, and the Good Prep, because they support the podcast. Big thank you to them, and a big thank you to you, Jordan. Thanks again for coming back on.
No, enjoyed it as always, and here for the next one.